we start?
Yes.
Got the alarm going.
That was a phone.
So you might want to turn off your phones and come here, get present. And one of the things I thought I would do is to start by blowing the wind whistle so you can really get a sense of what it feels like in your body to experience this work. And then if it sends you packing, we'll catch you next year. I've been trying to get to speak at the symposium now for several years. My book's been out for a couple years. I get 2 minutes to talk about my book, and then we'll get into the meat of what I'm talking about. And, you know, they said, no, it's not clinical enough, it's not clinical enough. So, you know, I had some people help me write it so that it would sound clinical enough. But the truth of what we're talking about today is serious stuff. And to me, that the path of nature is the path back to reassociating ourselves, reconnecting, and, you know, maybe finding a path where people can actually recover. And, you know, that's a whole other conversation. But so I thought, just because you've been really busy all day and probably this is your last session, I'll try to keep it funny and keep it going and things like that. I thought I would start by blowing the wind whistle. Do I have to plug it in or something?
Sorry, I thought I was, somebody just tested it, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think it has to have a little plug that goes in there or something. That's okay. All right, so why doesn't everyone, so this is very much a path of you go outside and feel the wind and your life starts to change. 5-10 minutes a day, and trust me, I'm known as a wind whistler. I'm not responsible for bringing the storm that's heading our way tomorrow. However, I believe that if we cooperate with nature, that we can connect to that energetics of what's happening out in the ocean and work with it for the betterment of ourselves, the community, and this conference. So you don't know who's going to blow in tomorrow or into your treatment centers tomorrow. So I'm going to blow the wind whistle 3 times, and this is a wind whistle that was made for me in Mexico. And all I'll tell you about the wind whistle is that once they started shipping from Mexico, they raised a supermarket in Mexico City, and Ecatol's wind temple was uncovered when they raised that supermarket. And a sound scientist introduced me to the whistle maker, who does not speak a word of English. We've been communicating for several years through Google Translator. And then a month or 2 after we started shipping the wind whistles, he passed away suddenly. So this is how, when you're aligned to your spiritual destiny, things start to align for you. And I believe that happened for me in my life when I, you know, got sober at 32 or 30. My father, I opened a restaurant. The grand opening came. My father, it was the first time we really had, we had this kind of disconnected relationship all our lives. And all of a sudden, a couple of months before all of this happened, he started showing up. He flew up to Syracuse where I was living, helped me buy a building, helped me open a restaurant. I have this big grand opening. My whole family comes. They were divorced, but everyone's on the same floor at the hotel, and it was a big party. Drank all day long. The next day, my father went home and had a massive stroke. And he lived a couple more years, but my stepfather dropped dead a couple of weeks later. It was a really messy time when I was 30. And I ended up, one night, I was doing cocaine in the basement of my restaurant, cooking 14 hours, doing cocaine at night, and I realized, wow, I might die at 52 too if I keep this up. So his demise was my spiritual awakening, and of this, this work was born 30 years later, okay? So what I would invite you to do to experience the wind whistle is to unwrap your feet, plant both feet on the floor. And this is a great self-soothing tool. I've worked with people with bipolar disorders and other things with this, and they just feel better after they blow the wind whistle, and I don't know why. But I think there's something about the exhale. Having to take that deep breath and then exhale it. So on the first wind breath, I'm going to invite you to feel your feet going down into the earth and planting them into the belly of the mother, like really getting a deep connection, because we're on very sacred land here. You know, we could forget it with all of the other stuff going around, but, you know, this is one of the first places we found our freedom. So let's connect into that earth, connect down into the bay, and feel that connection. On the second wind breath in, the wind that I've been working with all day is Hulda. And she's the Teutonic wind goddess she's a taskmaster, but new things are born, and there's a lot that goes on with Hulda. But we're gonna bring in Hulda. So imagine this wind energy coming in, and then the third wind breath, we're just gonna put a protective bubble around us at this symposium and the Cape, so that as the winds start to increase this afternoon, that we're all safe, we get to where we're going, and everything's nice. How's that sound?
Perfect.
And then if you think this is way too weird, I won't be offended if you leave. So feel those roots going deep into the belly of the earth. And let's call to Hulda. And keep us on task, keep us on time, keep us flowing. And on that third wind breath, we're gonna actually cooperate with nature for whatever's coming with us, that it's all in divine right order and divine right timing. When you're ready, you can open your eyes. Who felt that? Who experienced that? Great, good, that's good to hear. When I did this presentation at the West Coast Symposium, there was a man in the room who actually had a healing during that he explained, and it was like, it looked like the captain of the football team, and all of a sudden he's telling us about this shamanic experience he had, and it was really quite powerful. And one of the things about people who embrace this work, it's once you do this work, all of a sudden your life starts to change. No different than making that decision that I didn't want to die at 30. Just something happens, and I can't quite explain it, except for what I'm going to tell you today about how, when we start to incorporate nature-based traditions into our treatment programs, people do start to heal. And to me, the word recovery is a very big, loose and big word, because I think we've defined it in a small and narrow way that doesn't, you know, sometimes people get a little bit better, and sometimes people get a little bit better, and we don't know what that tipping point is. So one of the things that I had to do in my own recovery was to get over my judgmental idea of that I got something that they didn't get, and I did. So I work for a community outreach at Foundations Recovery Network. I've been there for 5.5 years, and one of the things that I was told was, don't bring the wind work to work. And I used to laugh because I embody this work. It's not that I bring it separate. And trust me, for my whole life, I was separate from everything, and this work has helped me become more connected. And so through that, I didn't have to seek anymore because I found it. And that's what we're going to talk about today: where it was lost, how we can find it, and how we can use other people to help other people recover. Oh, I guess it doesn't really work, but maybe?
Here it goes.
All right. So here's all my disclosures that I have to put. There's no commercial interest, although my boss did pay for me to fly out here, and only because I worked really hard this year. You know, so they paid for me to get here, I'll be honest with that. But I combined it with a vacation because I have family on the East Coast. And they're not paying for that because I have a program today and I'm honest, so I'm taking care of those things. So this is the big long that we can talk about, is that they have been shown to help other people. And more, I was talking to the podcaster yesterday, that this is becoming evidence-based. So when I was told it wasn't evidence-based 5 years ago, and I tried to speak at this symposium, look how far we've come in a few years, because now we're starting to be desperate enough that we're gonna start to look for other models. And truthfully, that's it. We're starting to look for other models because kids are dying. To me, there's a generation that's lost. And we're gonna talk about that today, how we got lost. It didn't happen in this generation. This is like 3 generations away from organized religions. Here we are, we're lost, but this has been a 10,000 year process of how we became unraveled and disconnected from nature. So the 4 Cardinal Winds, they have been persistent structures for how we've organized our reality since the get-go. You go back to the caves in Lascaux in France, all over the world, these ideas of these 4 directions have been showing up time and time again about how we organize our reality. And this is a consensual reality that we've decided upon, that is something that's agreed upon. But once you start to understand how you can work with these in your life and how you can use them to help your clients, you'll be off to the races. So the Awakening Compass is a tool that I created. I'm very much stubborn, and so I didn't want to teach you what my teacher taught me, so I set about to find something different. Lord knows I wasn't looking for the winds. And I can say this even with my uncle in the audience, I was looking for a book that my mother would read, because I wrote a book that my family disowned me for a year because it was about the whole relationship with my father. So I said, well, I'm going to write a book my mother would read. And it was going to be a coaching book for my clients about, is your compass pointing true north? I didn't even know what true north was. I didn't know what magnetic north was. And frankly, I couldn't use a compass. So when I got to 350 BC and saw that the Chinese had this lodestone floating in a bowl of water that automatically pointed north and south, I thought to myself, wow, we're 90% water, our body, our magnetics, and if we are aligned to our true magnetic north, we're going to have all of the answers within us if we're connected to nature. And that was the big if, and that's what the winds taught me. So we are suffering from a mass disassociation from nature. Anyone here in the room have children or grandchildren know getting them away from their iPads or their electronic devices is impossible. And then you're the bad parent if you really set those parameters. But this isn't the problem. This is just one more symptom of a problem that started 10,000 years ago. So we're very individualistic, and we are rugged individuals, we're materialistic, and we have unsustainable consumption. And as much as I try, how many bottles of water have you had since you got here? You know, I mean, and I'm not judging, because trust me, I just like buy the bigger gallons to pour them into my bottles to fill it up, and still that's not the right solution. So we're increasingly addictive, and we are exploiting our natural world. And this is at the root of our mass addiction. I truly, truly believe that our disassociation from nature is the cause of what we're experiencing now. This is just like the biggest example. So how did we get here? Like I said, we didn't get here overnight. One of the things, I'm working on my next book, and one of the things that I realized as I'm writing the next book was, you know, the talk is how we got here. And so before religion, okay, we didn't just get to religion. The planet's been around for 4 billion years, and there's been cycles of things. So if you start to look at the cycles, and if there's any historians in the room, this is the part that's getting a little bit skewed, because the more you learn, the more you know how little you knew. And so when we were hunter-gatherers, We were like reindeer who had to change direction when the wind blew. If we were living in Iceland, we needed to know when it was appropriate to leave Iceland to get to our summer stomping grounds. So as we moved further away from this idea of hunter-gathering, eating what was available and being in harmony, perfect harmony with our environment, we got to a place of, we started to settle. We started to be farmers. And we were still good because the word pagan has gotten a bad rap. I used to, I had a negative comment. Who has a negative connotation about the word pagan? You start to think, okay, well, I did. So it was kind of more, but those were the people who lived in the countryside. Go back 10, 11,000 years ago, everybody lived in the countryside. So basically we took pagans out of the country and then we started to build houses. And so what happened when we built our house? All of a sudden we had windows, we had doors. So in some subtle shift of our imagination, we believed now we could control nature. We could close the door on it, we could close the window on it, we could open the window on it. It's very practical, right, if you think about it. But something else happened then that was very important. So we went from living outside with the trees to living in the house built of trees, and all of a sudden we no longer had that direct connection with the wind and the water and all of these things because we were living inside thinking we were in control. And we started to need intermediaries to start to discern the information we were getting from nature. You with me? Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden, and trust me, I go to temples, I go to churches, I have good Christians for friends, but still what happened was all of a sudden, we didn't get our information from the water and the stars. One of my shaman teachers, he got to Peru once and the elder was in town and he said to him, well, how did you know I was coming? Because up at 18,000 feet, there's no phones and no nothing. He said, oh, the river told me. I mean, when is the last time we listened to the river? Hey, the river told me how to, no, I have to get in the car and ask Siri how to get over to Main Street. And I'm not saying that I'm any better, but I do take a wind walk and I try to reconnect. And so when I went to, after I quit drinking at 30, I went to a psych ward at 33 because when you took away the substances, there was somebody who was very broken. And the psychiatrist got me on this thing where he used to take, back then they didn't have dual diagnosis. So you either went to the lockdown ward or to Hazelton. Remember? Anyone else do treatment then? So this is me, I'm very precocious. Well, I want to go where there's a psychiatrist, right? I want to talk to the doctor. So all of a sudden, I wanted to talk to the doctor until the door slammed. And all of a sudden, I'm on this lockdown ward in Brooklyn, but I got there. I know it was a spiritual experience because I got there. I went to the airport to go there. I get on a plane in Syracuse, and there was nobody else on the plane but me. I mean, that just doesn't happen in this day and age, but I thought well, I'm queen bee until I get there and the door slams and it's like, but it was really good for me because then I understood the continuum of mental health and mental wellness. Oh, I'm not nearly as bad as the girl with the ADD in my room who can't stop washing her hands or, something else. But the doctor would take me off of the psych ward every day and we'd take walks around the neighborhood. And so that's where this started. So when we got to the Iron Age, we became more and more disconnected. Then we got to a place where all of a sudden we had lots of gods, and then we had one God, and your God was the correct God, and my God was the false God, and therefore we started fighting about whose gods were more powerful. Go back another 2,000 years, and there was lots of gods. There was the Caro in Peru, they believe that there's a God here and there's a God in here. And so we've separated ourselves from God and we think that we can only find God one way. And for 10,000 years, it's been through an intermediary. Well, 50 years ago, we took away the intermediary because we said, oh, I'm spiritual, I'm not religious. And so the church pews got empty and everyone's running around claiming spirituality. And if they were really so spiritual, would we be facing the mass disassociation that we're experiencing today? I think not. I think we've lost our rituals and ceremonies. So we got logical, all of that, and then we got to the Industrial Revolution. And this, if you take nothing else away from this talk today, this is where things really started to go askew. So imagine you're living out in nature, right? You got the spring, the fall, the summer, and all of that, and you're tending to your life based in this. Well, come along the Industrial Revolution, and all of a sudden, we became human commodities. We are based on what we could produce and how much lifetime we had to do it. So, you know, when you're hitting about 30 or so, you're supposed to be at your peak, you're growing, and then all of a sudden you hit 70 and like nobody wants you anymore. You're worth $10 an hour, and like, you know, your value has gone really down. Well, put now that we're living longer, you know, makes a whole long time of your life that you're not really considered very valuable. And our human biology is set up the same way. You have genes to help you produce, and then all of a sudden your genes are set to kill you. So it's all relationship. But so we have this idea that we've been human doings for so long that we have forgot how to be. So there was a question on Larry Robinson, and that was some of the research was, you know, why do these human beings, these human machines keep breaking down? And why do they develop symptoms, the substance abuse? Because we're not machines. But we're functioning like we're a machine. And now we've got our Palm pilots, which are an extension of that. And, you know, we bought hook, line, and sinker into this idea. However, why do you think so many of our kids are discouraged? Because we're living at a time of Anthropocene, and everyone in the room, because I can see there's a lot of older people here, not too many in that 20 to 30 at this point. However, so we could say, yeah, but we could have done ourselves in with the nuclear, we could have done ourselves in with all of this stuff, but we're living at a time where our human consumption greed and is creating a place of an unstable earth. And trust me, I'm a person who preaches a lot of hope, and I think that we can turn this ship around with the wind. And I'll say that. However, these kids that are coming up now, so now they're 2 generations away from church. Okay, so my parents said, you need to go to church. So, you know, we got dropped off at Sunday school every week, and, you know, we did all of those things. My sister, on the other hand, I think her kids have been to church, you know, for deaths. You know, I think they might have gotten baptized and christened. And yet we're prophesizing that we think that they should go to church, but what we're showing people is that, well, I don't go, but you should. And so as you get further and further away from there, you have a generation lost who have no rituals, no ceremony, no community, and they're locked in their cyber worlds. Now, so the world, listen, the world has been around for 4 billion years. We haven't. You know, all these people who are very sensitive to the world problems and, you know, feel all this stuff, the world is going to go on without us. Whether or not we go on will be our choice about how we really start to embrace nature. Because like the shamans know, we are nature. We know who many people in here believe that energy and atoms are at the base of everything? Well, we're made up of the same stuff. We're that same 90% of the polluted water out there. We are those storms. We are not separate. And so what's happening is there is a chasm. There is a big degree of separation, and you know, we have to find our way through this, because that's where we can start to offer hope. And you know, I don't want to go to the Anthropocene. I don't know if everyone knows what that means, but it means that living the way we do, we have the ability to, you know, do the humanity in. So look at this. Youth have lost their connection to nature, and it's not just our youth. I was in Peru about 7 years ago, and I thought, oh, I was so sad when I left, because I thought, I'm gonna have to go back there and teach them the practices that I learned in Peru 20 years ago from their teachers who have now since passed over, because they can't even afford milk and they have an iPhone. They can't eat and they have an iPhone. So where are we going with that? So back then I used to fish. Last year I was lucky enough to teach at a retreat center that I used to love, was one of the first places I went for a retreat. And the pond had this algae scum on it that you couldn't swim in it. I mean, and that's just in a short, 50-year cycle of what we've been able to do. That, why would we have a lot of hope? Why? Because I believe these young people are seeking a spiritual experience. They're seeking connection to something, and the drugs and the alcohol give a false sense of that. So it's our responsibility as adults to show people a different way. And how do we do that? Is by living in harmony and practicing what we preach. So right now, more than half of the world live in an urban setting. Why? Because we're overpopulated. I haven't been to Hyannis in years, but I remember when I came here as a kid, 40 years ago, it wasn't looking like this. It wasn't even built for this. So many cities, so we are not built for what we're doing, so we have to change. So city dwellers have a 20% higher risk of anxiety disorder and a 40% higher risk of mood disorders. And I think that if you start to go out into nature on a daily basis, 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, I'm not talking about becoming a Buddhist monk and sitting there with your legs crossed and praying all day long. I'm talking about, do your treatment options have nature in them? I don't know, I should record this, but I know for our treatment program that when the money got tight, that was one of the first things we cut. The adventure team was no longer going overnight over this and over that, and it was like, because we think that's something we could cut instead of something that we need desperately. The other thing is I don't know, who has an RV here, anyone? I tried to get an RV, and then I saw what you had to do every time you parked it and you had to clean it. It was just terrible.
Yeah, I'll take it.
I'll go hide any day.
Yeah, I'll take it.
But that aside, you have to make reservations to camp in nature and stuff like that, because there's like waiting lines for months. That's again because we have too many people trying to use too few parks. However, over the last 50 years, there's been a decline in the amount of time we spent in nature. It correlates, because I did my research. It correlates with the exact same exodus from organized religion. Now, again, I'm not telling everyone, I'm not prophesizing, and don't get me my church, but maybe I should have one, that there is a direct correlation between ceremony, ritual, and time spent in nature. Anyone, you're still with me?
Yes.
Okay. Who's seen these now? The 3D classes, so you can spin from your living room and think you're in Montana.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe the spinning is good,
Right.
but I prefer to go out my front door, say to the wind, I got this question for you, wait until it kisses me on the cheek, and take a little walk. There's something different about getting on the bike over in Orleans and riding out to the beach than looking at it at a billboard thinking, oh yeah, honey, we need to go out in nature more. So there's a crisis of faith plaguing the Western world. So one of the reasons I have a lot of Christians for friends is because they have a spiritual practice. When I had a catering business, I had Mormons who worked for me. They had a spiritual practice. They'd call me before the catering, ask me if I needed to bring ice. They were really good people having a consistent, people who go to AA, I mean, and that's a great program. I mean, don't get me wrong, I started there. I go there if I need to. I know it's there. But the same way that we've slipped through our iPhones, unless you really work that program from start to finish, which means surrendering, doing that inventory, and making those amends. So many desperate people out there never made the amends. Well, I had a sponsor who made me get on a plane, go back to the East Coast, pay the people I stole from, do all of the things that I needed to do, and I found God there. One of the times I went and did the amends, to a graveside amends to somebody, a chef that I used to yell at every single day when he came to work just for being in my way. And I went and made the graveside amends. The next day I thought, oh, I'm so proud. And then I found I had to drive 2 hours to go make another amends because I got signs. And I get out to that town 2 hours away. I make the amends to the guy who said, oh my God, you're here because I got partway through the steps and I got so depressed, I couldn't get out of bed for a year. I see that the amends are an important part of this. Duh. So I was even feeling bigger and broader. Well, I walk into a store, we're talking 2 hours away, I'm 3,000 miles away from home. This kid's been dead for 10 years. I walk into a store and standing in front of me is his mother. And if you didn't think that the hair stood up on my arms, and I'm like trying to pull out the cards to show where I'd made the amends, like I needed that kind of thing. So the steps work if you work them. So as we become more aware of our relationship, we can restore awe and wonder. And that's what's missing. That's what I got when I made those amends, was some awe. Oh my God, there's somebody bigger than me. They organized a flight, an upside down light where I'd done a lot of my damage, so I left the restaurant and said, oh, I gotta drive out there. All of that was organized by some higher power than myself. So society evolves through our spiritual evolution. So we're in an evolution process now. Where I think we are in this evolution process is in the gap. So we all heard, what was it, 2013? What was the year where we were supposed to end? Whatever.
I mean, 2000 was the first one there.
What was?
2012.
Oh, 2012. All right, the world was going to end. So if the world ended, we're in a gap. We're just in a gap. We don't know what's next. So the good news is all of you are sitting here at 4:30, 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon because you want to make a difference. So in this gap, we can put something forward, something different, something better into the world. So this is the sad truth of it, because you need a little bit of research. 1 out of every 6 American young people between 18 and 25 battled a substance use disorder in 2014. They're the highest group. So who's suffering from our disassociation from nature? Heroin addiction has doubled in the last 10 years. And then, 17%, 22 million individuals have a drug or alcohol problem. And what I'm not even saying here, ladies, is women over 50 are going to be the largest unemployable due to depression, anxiety, and stress in the next 3 years. So it's coming after us next. So part of this whole thing that I preach, and I sound like a preacher, give me a pulpit, is the religious incongruency. I don't care what it is, you do need something that holds you together. Because we've had this search for meaning forever. So what's providing you that meaning in your life? You need something. The Anthropocene, which we talked about, the alienation, the disassociation, and then I love this word, the solastalgia. We're seeking the recognition of a lost place in our lives. We've lost something that we don't know how to find, and it's causing us to be further and further divided. One of the big symptoms of it is how we've allowed ourselves to fight with our neighbors. Never before in history have we been fighting with the people who live next door for us because of ridiculous things. It's dividing us further and further because of this mass disassociation, there's a room for this fighting to come in. You know, I have neighbors who go on all one side, and you know what, I'm with them at dinner? You know, I hear we disagree about that, so let's just eat our salmon. When so far that, you know, that people aren't getting along and we're creating bigger chasms, we can't afford to have a bigger chasm. We need to get together on the same boat. This is the Noah's Ark floating down the river here, and we need to all get on it because we have this mass disassociation from nature, and our kids are dying. So this is what I'm proposing. Instead of that timeline frame that we've been into for the last 8 to 10,000 years, we need to get back into a cyclical relationship with our lives. We can't go, produce, because then we die. So if we understand that there's a cycle to everything, including addiction. When I got through that 30-year cycle of addiction, there was a gap where I was lost for a couple years. Then this gap, which we're in now collectively after, you know, this 14,000 years, so we're in a collective gap right now. So we get to start all over where we can sprout something new. We got to get on the same page to sprout something new. We got to say no more of these buildings taking away more trees and stuff because we need our trees in order to survive. And then we could start to grow something new, something better. So if you have an addict, and this was something that I learned, I thought, well, if I spent 10 years getting this high, this loaded, that if I spend 10 more years, another cycle, healing, I still have another 30, 40, 50 years, depending on how long I want to live, to create new things. So this is our big life cycle, but then you have little cycles in between there, and if you have relationships, they have their own cycles. I mean, think about a time when you and your partner are in sabbatical, and then other times when you're not, because your cycles are in a different place. So can you imagine if you started to live your life based on this? One of the big changes would be like, stop making New Year's resolutions. You're supposed to be hibernating. Instead, we make a big long list of goals that we're going to get to in January when, you know, when our acorn, our seeds are under the cold earth. But we didn't have that when we had to produce another gear, another thing. So this is the biggest key that I'm telling people in my next book is that we have to go from that linear line into a more cyclical approach, and that means in your treatment processes as well. So you're not trying to get somewhere with somebody. There's no point A and point B to this life. The only experience that doesn't count is the one that kills you. And that counts too, but you know, it's a process. Where are you living in your process? So that could sound like a really hard way to go. Like, how do I move from how do I start? Where do we start? How do I take my inner city treatment office and make it more nature conducive? They've studied that there's 3 ways of doing this. You don't have to move your office out under the park. You can start by organizing your office or your therapeutic situation so that you bring the outdoors in, because we know that that reduces stress. So who's got a window in their office? Is it behind you or are you looking out at it?
It depends.
So start to think about, where is the nature in my office? That psychiatrist was brilliant. I don't know if he knew he was so brilliant, but he used to take me out, you know, around the neighborhood from the psychiatric institution so that we walked in nature. How many of you take your clients for a walk? That's great. How many are gonna take their clients for a walk? So that's okay. I'm not trying to embarrass you or anything. But for me, there was something that happened when we left that gated environment that I could start to loosen up, and that I was just walking and talking, that I could tell him things that I couldn't tell him sitting in an office, because I don't know about you, I can hardly still sit through dinner. You know, I chow it down, I'm just that way. But when I walk with the trees, like I work with a woman, we have a weekly podcast called The Shaman's Cave, and her thing is find a tree and become its friend for the year. Go back to the same tree for one whole year and see what the tree starts to tell you, what you learn from that tree. Have each of your patients for 30 days, if you can get them for 30 days, we get them for about 14, to go outside and befriend a tree. I'll never forget, in between jobs, I had this sponsor, and I said, I know I'm supposed to be doing something big with my knife. No, I'm supposed to be doing something very, very important. She said, why don't you just go outside today and learn how to be a tree? And I mean, hiked up that mountain 16 times trying to get it. The wind is way easier. Let me tell you, tell somebody to go outside and feel the wind. Most of them will tell you, oh, I hate the wind, or this, but then when you start, one thing, you might hate me, you might not listen to me, you might think that woman is for the birds. Thank God I got my 1.5 hours. However, you will never have the same relationship with the wind ever again because you heard it here. So then you could have, you know, the incidental interactions. Like, so say we happen to have a campus that is outdoors where people walk between buildings to go to the thing. That's just how it's set up. I'm in Palm Springs, it's nice there. You can do that most of the year. But, you know, another thing is to make people walk between groups. And then the intentional interactions are the adventure teams, the planned hikes, the outdoor experiences. How many of the people here have those as part of their treatment planning? Well, I'm glad you're all here. Hello? We have to. Do we want it in another 10 years to be double that number? I'm starting a new initiative out in California with our business development reps to train everyone to administer Narcan. And I haven't been a big proponent of medical assisted treatment for a number of reasons. However, that's changed when I heard a doctor say, how am I going to keep you alive long enough to get this? But it's not the solution. It's like, if you do that, can you take somebody for a 5, 10, 15-minute walk every day? Can you start to integrate those other things in? Because what happened for me was the psychiatrist put me on the lithium and the Zoloft, and I'm there like, well, now my restaurant's taking me 15 hours a day instead of 14 hours a day. I don't like how this feels. I ended up finding an Ayurvedic doctor. I was off all of the medication in 6 months, and I've never gone back. That's my story. Again, now we're 30 years beyond that peak, so we've got more to contend with. So what I did was, because I want you to take something away from this, is easy to implement treatment suggestions. And do they send you my slides, or if you want my slides?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can print this out. The simplest one is to get off the computer.
That's the best one.
You know, to start working on a seasonal compass. And I am teaching a course with the Shift Network at the end of the year that it's going to launch in November. And the way it launches is, I'm going to do like, let's look at let's take an assessment of this year. Then I'm going to put people into hibernation for a few weeks. And then we pick back up, you know, and go into, you know, January, February, which is like really cool because it starts to set your schedule. And I'm not trying to sell you that course, but that I'm trying to do my programs, my teaching based on this belief. So just, I mean, you can read that list. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to make a list of, you know, indirect interactions. Give me some 5 indirect interactions you can implement with no money right now. Anyone? Yes.
I have a potted plant.
Perfect. Potted plant in your office. Real plant?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Pets.
Pets, yes, pets are good.
Similar to pets, but fish.
Fish, okay. They're swimming in water, perfect.
Open the window.
Open the window. Remember, 10,000 years ago, we closed the windows and thought we had some it started our idea that we were more powerful than nature. Hello, what are we? We are nature. We're not separate, we're not different, we are nature. Anyone else? Yes.
If you have dirt around, you can have, a bowl with dirt and stones to
Yeah,
use,
to-
manipulate.
Absolutely. Yes.
Wind chimes.
Wind chimes, right. Yes. Sage. Now, sage is a great one. Just some people don't like, a lot of men don't like the smell of sage. I don't know why.
Get them vanilla instead.
Get the vanilla, but yes, but bring in some kind of, something that reminds you. Bring in a plants, like cut flowers. Anything like that, those are simple little things that you can do to start. Because I want you to do it. I don't want you to go away and say, oh, this is too hard, one more thing I gotta do. No, start to look for things that you can integrate. Even a picture of an ocean on your wall. A picture of nature on your wall, maybe a big mural of nature on your wall. Something that brings the outdoors in. Was that indirect? Incidental, okay. So incidental ones, anyone? Those are the ones that are walking in between buildings, rearranging, putting something on your porch.
The residential treatment, we have a beautiful lake.
Nice.
They have sessions on the dock.
Right. They have that at Betty Ford. They have like a walk-around path. My friend is over there, so I get a tour.
Do you like stone stacking?
Stone stacking, that's a great one. Stones are great. I don't have one here, but even for you as therapists, I'm gonna give you a little trick. Get yourself a black stone, or if you're a therapist, because at the end of every day, if you hold a stone for 5 minutes for every client you had, so say you stacked up that day, you had 6 clients, hold a black stone while you're driving home, send all the energy that's not yours into that stone, it will clear you. Because who takes that, and so that's an incidental one.
I have a black stone that has love carved into it, so you can.
Even better, so she reminds
rub
herself.
that.
Anyone else?
Collection of lucky stones.
Right, and or something that we've done at Michael's house is we painted stones. The recovery stones. All right, so intentional interactions in your regular day. I'm gonna give you how to take a wind walk, okay? So how you take a wind walk is that you open the door of your house, step outside, or your office. Maybe you take a client on a wind walk. Say, what question would you like to answer today? And then you just wait for the wind to come up. You just have to feel a little, because the wind will always come up, because if the wind's not blowing, you get the stagnant of that lake and things start to happen. So there's always a gentle breeze, maybe see it in the trees shimmering or whatever, and then you start to walk. 15, 20 minutes, you come home and the answer's either there for you by the time you get home or when you sleep or something like that. Does that sound reasonable? Anyone else have any other ones that they could add to treatment without making it a big production? Yes? Essential oil diffusers, yes, with some, yes, that could work. Uh-huh. Liliana?
Actually, a bird feeder outside my window, so people can see the birds coming in.
Oh, that's nice.
I like things of natural materials in my
Oh,
office.
natural materials in your office, like get rid of the plastic chairs. See, they're just things that we've gotten so accustomed to moving away from. Yes.
Do mindful walking.
Mindful walking, well, that's kind of like the wind walk. The other thing,
Than the wind.
the other thing that I do is a wind bath, where you actually take people out in nature and let the wind blow through them and clear off all that negative energy. Because if you don't think after the last binge that there's a lot of negative energy attached to you, I know it's true because I had this ritual of going back to smoke every once in a while. And then I was working with a plant medicine shaman, and she said, oh, you still smoking? And it was very ritualistic, very hidden on the stoop. No one saw me, no one knew. And so I'm there, yeah, she goes, oh, well, let's work on that. I saw the energy of who was smoking through me, and I've never picked up another cigarette. So we invite these energetic forms because we're all nature, we're all energy. And so when we put ourselves into these situations, then we have the possibility of having energy stick to us. All right. So this becomes a question of what does recovery mean to you? And so for me, it means like that I show up present in my life pretty much 90–95% of the time. I'm present to what I'm doing now. The wind only blows in the present. It doesn't blow yesterday, it doesn't blow tomorrow, although we've got our, our weather forecasters telling us it's gonna blow tomorrow. But if we stick right now and ask the wind a question today, we're in the wind now. So you can only answer what recovery means to you. Some people, it means a solid 12-step program, but if our blinders are on so small and we have kids looking for a spiritual experience, we may be looking in the wrong, we may not be looking in a broad enough field. Maybe you bring somebody to nature and they find nature, and that might be a stepping stone that might get them back towards a more purposeful, meaningful life. So I think we're gonna have to readjust our parameters for, remember, these kids are 2 generations away and they're lost. So we have to, and this took us 10,000 years to get this way, and we're trying to solve an opioid problem today. It's a little tricky. So, what better question should we be asking treatment? What different models can we bring? And if the money is tight, because the money's tight now, how do we bring those models in with this less staff and less people and less insurance dollars? So we're gonna have to be more creative about this. When are we gonna start to do some research about nature-based traditions and other non-evidence-based CBT, DBT, all of those have lots of research. We could stop now. We need some research on some other topics. So who's got a topic they want to get out there? You need to put your application in for 3 years over here at, Cape Cod Symposium. Yes?
The organization I work for has recently started a therapeutic horticulture program, and our research department has funded a research grant for that.
Absolutely, that's great. I want to know more about that.
It's very inexpensive. We're doing very small things, but
I've been involved as the slow food movement of actually putting gardens in schools and stuff like that. And trust me, kids don't even know where their food came from. A couple of years ago, I thought I was going to teach some cooking classes just for fun, but my schedule was way too busy. But the first day of class, people showed up with non-food in my class. And you have to know that I was a gourmet chef. And I'm like, no, Cheetos, no. So I dragged them all up to the spice store all right, if you want barbecued spicy Cheetos, I want you to make a barbecued spicy chicken with the herbs and spices we can find at the store. So, cooking would be a great program to have, because cooking saved my life. I had to get present enough to prepare food for the people who were going to show up at my restaurant that night. So work programs that involve our creative senses coming present's a big one. So, most people don't let you in the kitchen. Stay away from the kitchen, you can clean the tables. So we've got to really think about how we're doing this that's going to help people further. We have to shift the paradigm. Now, I'm not even going to say, can we shift the paradigm? We have to shift the paradigm, and I believe we can. So, Samsha says recovery is health, home, purpose, and community. I have all of those today. I'm a little self-centered still, and so I don't spend a lot of time with a lot of people, but, I do and I don't. So, but that's a big place for me. I mean, we're not going to do all of these perfectly, but we strive to have these things in our life. So we have all of these, we talked about those. So there's lots of alternative programs that can work besides for the 12-step models, and this nature-based idea is one of them. The guy who does the podcast runs a beautiful program for children up in Colorado where he gets kids around the fire and tells them stories about the bear tribe. That's one of the exciting parts about my book, was that when I got into research, I started with the Grimm's fairy tale on the winds and Sherlock Holmes and all of that. And then I got even to a broader base. We forgot our myths that got us here. We need new myths. So, the 12-step model, acceptance, surrender, action, and service. Nature-based traditions. So we have this need and longing for connection, reflection, and ritual. Think about it, smoking pot, rolling it up, very ritualistic. All of these things, the pipe and all of these things are very ritualistic about how we protect our drugs, how we do our drugs, how we drink, all of that stuff. So we really have been seeking these, we've just been looking for them in the wrong place. So your first step for this is to acknowledge the separation and disconnection in nature. Have I convinced you that, or maybe you didn't need convincing, do you believe that we have a disconnection to nature?
Yes.
Okay, so we've all surrendered, and that it's primary. Like, see how it follows through? All spiritual programs have the same principles. You want to invite nature in as allies, whether it's the wind, the storm, all of that. And then you want to take an inventory to see where you're in integrity and out of integrity with nature. Could you cut back on one plastic bottle today? This week? What could you do this week? Could you take one wind walk? Can you look around your center? Or how are we doing things? And let's start to move in that direction. So I'm the practical shaman. What is that? So everything is interconnected. There's an alternative reality happening at the same time. I believe I can journey to that reality and affect what's going on in this reality here. I've seen it happen. Remember I told you I blew the wind whistle and that guy had a healing that one could not even explain? That we have spirit helpers. Who has spirit helpers? Yay, angels. Right? See, we all have some connections. Energy has a unique footprint and a vital force all its own. Trust me, heroin has its own vital force and energy. Not so sure about the synthetic fentanyls that we're creating and stuff like that, because they seem designed to kill, to disconnect us further. My older sister is a heroin addict for most of her life. And she told me that the heroin addicts stopped using the heroin, the older ones, because they knew what the fentanyl would kill them. So they went back to cocaine. It gave her a stroke, but they knew that there's something about that that's foreign. And it's possible for me to do spiritual work while I'm in these other realms. Who's had a shamanic journey in here? Only a few of you. So basically, shamans get to alternate realities through, I can show you. Through rattle, through trance dancing, through singing, through drumming, all these different ways. What they do is they break away the brain pattern. My wind whistle will take me into an alternate reality. The only problem is if you're working with dual diagnosis, which most of all our clients are, you have to test out the rattle before you use it or drum in a group. Because I've noticed that when they did let me teach some, I could trigger some kids, and I didn't want to do that. So you have to be really careful. And then I had a coaching client who was severely bipolar, and some of my practices, me and the psychiatrist got into a really big fight about, and whether the family opted to go with him, and that was okay, but I had to learn some really hard lessons about really distinguishing what consensual reality is for some people, and that's where I draw the line. So addicts are speaking spiritual. Look at raves they're a spiritual quest. Dancing all night, ritualistic preparations, central music and dancing, pharmacology. And did you notice there's like a big comeback right now for the ayahuascas and all of the plant medicine stuff? Now, I have opinions about those because I know there's shamans who are really doing really great work, and then there's like this fad, let's do some medicine work, let's, that's not what I'm proposing. The medicine shaman I know is also a therapist. She doesn't mix her medicines, but she brings all of those years of her therapeutic into holding space for the plant medicine work. A lot of other ones, that's, ibogaine is gonna be legal next year. I just interviewed an ibogaine guy from a clinic down in Central America. 90% of the kids that are going to the ibogaine farm in where he is don't pick up, don't use for a year at least. Hard work on a body. And then the formation of social relationships, which we've got to get off of our iPads and our computers in order to do. We think it is the biggest illusion that we're making connections all over the world. We're sitting in our little cubicles, disconnected, more disconnected than ever. So if you're not getting out once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week with your friends, you're pretending. Delusional, thank you. So that's that. So, so these are spiritual quests. So you can connect with nature, journey, healing. All of these are things that you can do. You don't have to go sit on a mountain for 3 days and 3 nights without food or water like I did. But I learned a lot. So these activities affect the deeper part of the brain. They help us to recover our awe and wonder, which we've lost. And then we get self-regulation and self-reflection. And once these parts of the brain are engaged, the person is not activated. When I was cooking, I was not activated. I was doing crazy things all there, but I was cooking and focused. So you want to start to look at how your programs are already doing this, which we've been talking about. And I really hope you go back through these slides. Rites of passage. AA has always had the coin, the chip outs. You do chip outs. They know that they enhance relaxation, theta waves, awareness. You get excited for somebody else is getting a chip. I mean, it brings us back. And you reintegrate with the self. You get music and drumming programs. So we're going to redefine our health. We're going to go from that linear, I'm no longer useful, to I'm going to create a system of health for myself, and then I'm going to be understanding my life in terms of a cycle. And you can use this, if nothing else, tell your addicts, you're at the end of that cycle, you can start a new cycle. You're not at the end of your life unless you overdose. You can start a new cycle, and you have all of this room to build and grow something new, and the end of that next cycle is not going to look as desperate and hopeless as that last cycle. But when you think that these are your ultimate performance years and you're in the crack house, you missed it. But if you think about it in terms of only one part of your life, doesn't that feel a little bit better? I just told you all that. And so what am I leaving you with? Okay. This is what we're going to do. I'm going to teach you one little simple wind work exercise to end. Liliana, will you take my picture from back there with all of these people? Because this is a great big audience and I love it. I should have big audiences, right?
Yes.
Good. At least that was fun for the last class of the day, right?
Yes.
All right, so this is the thing. I'm going to teach you a really simple exercise that you can do in your treatment programs with people that are simple, and you don't even need a wind whistle. You can imagine it or do it outside. So what is, you've been out here all day long, you might be like, wish this Renee would shut up already or whatever. But right in the air, right in the wind, one little thing that you can let go of, this is where that guy had the healing, that you could let go of today. Don't go into a big trauma. And if you can't go into your idea right now, this is what my spiritual teacher will tell them. They don't have to go into their bodies, and they could go in over here. But I'm assuming that you're all therapy and in all levels, so you can go in your body. So what's one thing you want to give up? It could be an annoyance, a person. All right, close your eyes. Everyone put your feet on the ground again. So we're going to write it in the air, all right? So write it in the air. I want everyone to write down what they're willing to give up. Maybe you have a headache. And then we're gonna call on Madame Feng Popo. Remember I started this where I went back to China to 3050 BC? Well, they had a wind goddess named Madame Feng Popo who rides on the back of a tiger and carries her wind in a bag. And she's gonna swoop down now with her open bag as I blow the wind whistle, and she's gonna scoop up all of the things you just wrote in the air. All right, you ready? So if you got any more, write it out now. And her and her wind tiger, they're gonna seal up that bag, they're gonna take it out beyond the Milky Way, and they're gonna toss it out to the galaxy with love and light. Everyone help toss that out to the galaxy with love and light. Now check in and see if you don't feel just a little bit lighter. You feel the wind? All right, I love it. So you'll have that exercise there. You can reach me, Renee, at the Practical Shaman. I do have books up here that I'm gonna sign, and I'm also doing a book signing tomorrow morning at 10 in the cafe. Like I said, I brought a case of books, so I'm counting on you. I really want them to get into treatment facilities, and I really believe that this is a path that people, why not the wind? If you can't find God any other way, the wind is always blowing out there, and if it stops blowing, we should be concerned. Here's my resources, and thank you.